Okay, you good? You're good to go.
Great. Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us today for the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program Rule Advisory Committee. This is our first meeting as we're kicking off our 2024 rulemaking. So really excited to have you all here. I know we're all pretty familiar with each other because we're also you all are also members of the Agricultural Heritage Commission. But today, for at least this portion of the meeting, you're going to be wearing your Rule Advisory Committee hats. And so you're operating in a little different capacity. And with that in mind, I think as we do introductions, we can just go around, say who you are, the interests you represent on the commission, and then also kind of what you see as the area of expertise you're bringing to this rulemaking process. So we'll just do a quick round of introductions, and then I'll dive into kind of how this is all going to work. I'll start. I'm Taylor Larson. I'm the coordinator for the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program here at OWEB, and I'll be facilitating this rulemaking process. And I think let's start with OWEB staff, and then we'll go to our RAC members. So I'll kick it over to Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Eric Hartstein. I'm policy coordinator at OWEB. And do you want us to pick the next person, Taylor, or are you going to be dealing with that?
I can do that. Robin, go for it.
Hi, everyone. Robin Meacher. I'm the Conservation Easement Specialist for the OAHP.
Thanks, Robin. Renee?
Good afternoon, everyone. Renee Davis, Acquisitions and Special Programs Manager at OWEB.
Thanks, Renee. And then Teresa?
Hi, Teresa DeBartolave. I'm the Drought Program Specialist at OWEB, and I'm here to support the Oregon Ag Heritage meeting here, and I'll be taking notes.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Teresa. And then Stephanie.
Good afternoon, commission members. Stephanie Page, Acting Executive Director at OWEB for a couple more weeks, and then I'll go back to my day job as Deputy Director.
Awesome. And then I guess lurking in the background, we have Nicole.
Yes, hello, Nicole Bettinardi, Power Behind the Throne, Executive Assistant.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. All right, now to our RAC members. We'll start off with the first person on my screen, which is Amanda.
Good afternoon. I'm Amanda Lowe. I'm the OWEB appointed tribal representative on the Oregon Ag Heritage Commission. And the rest of the time, I'm soil conservationist in the Range Ag and Forestry Program in the Department of Natural Resources for the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. So I suppose to the Rule Advisory Committee process, I bring technical expertise and some of my own grant work experience.
So thanks, Amanda. Bruce.
Yeah, I am Bruce Taylor, and I live in Portland. I am the vice chair of the Agricultural Heritage Commission, and I bring the experience of having slugged through, 10 hours. No, I don't know how many hours of meetings. 10 meetings, maybe it was the last time we rewrote the rules or wrote the rules back in the year I can't even quite remember. I think it was 2017, somewhere around there.
That's when the bill passed. I think the rules were fully adopted in early 2019, but I wasn't there. Thanks, Bruce. Doug.
Yeah, Doug Kramer. I represent the Board of Ag, or appointed by the Board of Ag. I'm a farmer here in the Willamette Valley. And I guess my expertise is I've been involved in this organization since we were dreaming about it. So
Happy to have you here still, Doug. Thank you.
thanks.
Ed.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ed Contreras. I am on the Oregon Ag Heritage Commission representing Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. And my current capacity, I do a lot of landscape scale conservation in Southeast Oregon, centered on water birds and wetlands. And the experience that I bring to this is helping develop conservation programs and implement conservation programs primarily on private lands. So hopefully I can help with this effort.
Great. Thanks, Ed. Nancy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy Duncrack. I'm the PLCD representative on the commission, and I manage the pro bono legal program for the Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts. So I bring some legal expertise and experience with conservation easements to this rulemaking.
Thanks for joining us. Barbara.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am the liaison to the OAHP board, so I'm just sitting in. I will not participate. I am listening and be learning from all of you today. And I'm in Burns for the Board of Ag meeting, and Lisa says hello to all of you.
Thanks for the message, Barbara. Let's see, Lois. Oh, and you're muted, Lois. All right, Lois, while you're unmuting, I'm going to pass it to Laura.
Hi, everybody. Laura Masterson. I grow organic vegetables in the Willamette Valley, appointed through the ODA board, where I served from 2010 to 2018 as a board member. And let's see, the expertise I bring has just been trying to work on Oregon having more easements through various organizations, including the East Multnomah SWCD since 2008. So happy we've making some progress.
Happy to have you here. And then Lois, looks like you're off mute. Maybe, maybe not. Okay. Well, Lois, when you do figure out how to get your mic going, just speak up and let us know so that we're able to fully include you in the process. But luckily for you all, the next few minutes. Oh, perfect. Go for it, Lois.
I'm not muted right now.
Yeah, you're not.
My whole
But we've lost you, Lois. Okay. Well, when you're back, Lois, which you seem to be back now and muted, it would be really great to have you participate. So I do kind of want to figure out how to make this work.
Taylor, I can connect with Lois separately, maybe about phoning in potentially.
Okay. Yeah. Could you do the same thing with Woody as well? Because I think he got lost between the two meeting rooms.
well, I don't know how long I was egg. This is my second. I'm involved in the butterfly and 30 years in USDA programs of the water's availability and purity is something I'm very interested in. And if you lose.
Okay, well, yeah, it was a little hard to hear you, Lois, but we are really lucky to have Lois here as part of this process, and I hope we can get the technical things figured out so we can get your perspective, Lois. But while we're working on that, I'm going to jump into a quick little, and I might say so myself, a bit boring PowerPoint here, just to kind of ground us in the history of the program and what we're doing here as a rulemaking body, so that once we jump into kind of going through our rule set and thinking about tweaks we want to make to help the program run more efficiently and better meet the purpose that it was set out to meet, that we're well grounded in where this whole thing came from. So with that, I am going to attempt to share my screen and a PowerPoint. So if you'll bear with me for just a second, I will try and get that to happen. So I go share screen. And okay, I would assume you're all seeing a PowerPoint slide. It says that we're here for a meeting about rulemaking for the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program. So just to reorient us, we've done our intros. I'm going to give a quick little background about the program and just try and root our rulemaking in the bill that established the program and then the resulting statute that kind of that guides the program. And then we'll turn it over to Eric Hartstein for a quick little refresher on the role of a RAC in the rulemaking process. And then we're going to spend the majority of the meeting with our rule set. And we're going to be doing a deep dive into Division 5, which are our administrative rules, and then Division 10, which are the rules that govern the Conservation Management Plan program. We aren't going to be touching on Division 15, 20, or 25, which we'll be doing in future RAC meetings. Division 15 is our conservation easement program. Division 20 and 25 are the technical assistance and succession planning programs, respectively. So all that to say, we're going to try and keep some sideboards on the conversation and keep it focused on our administrative rules and the conservation management plan rules, but they do exist within the larger rule set, and tweaks we make in one place do affect other programs. And so we'll just have to kind of keep that front and center. So the background I was going to touch on, like I said, I just want to go through, touch on a few things that resulted from the bill, House Bill 3249, way back in 2017, that established the program, and then the resulting statute that came out of that bill. And then, after the statute was established, there was an initial rulemaking process of which some of you took part. That is going to be our jumping off point today. And then just going to highlight a few lessons learned and observations and some feedback we've gotten through the 2022 cycle. We just had a forum with applicants from our initial grant offering and received some really useful feedback, in addition to just some observations we've had as staff running the program, and even feedback we've gotten from commissioners along the way as to what would be useful and maybe what is not as useful in the rule set. And so I'm going to try and summarize that real quick. I apologize for the text heavy couple of slides here, but what I think it's really important that we spend just a second with the whereas statements from the 2017 bill. I think these don't show up in our statute or our rule set, but they do help us kind of understand the original legislative intent of the program. And so I just wanted to, as painful as it may be, read through these real quick. So I'm not going to read the whereas, but Oregon's rich agricultural heritage and diverse farm and ranch lands are the cornerstone of Oregon's rural communities and support a variety of natural resource functions. And the economy of Oregon developed through a long tradition of land stewardship that supports both agricultural and natural systems. And over 1/4 of Oregon's 63 million acres are private working lands, creating agricultural production that is valued at $5.4 billion as of 2017, and is the second largest economic driver in Oregon. Well-managed agricultural lands support valuable fish and wildlife habitat and enhance other natural resources. And despite Oregon's unique land use protections, Oregon's farms and ranches and social, economic, and ecological values supported by those farms and ranches are increasingly challenged by fragmentation through new land uses, conversion to non-farm use, and the complexity of regulations and planning for generational transfers. And I promise this is the last slide of the whereas statements. The protection of Oregon's agricultural lands and their associated natural resource values can be enhanced by flexible voluntary tools tailored to the needs of individual farmers or ranchers, and the use of voluntary tools can leverage federal monies to protect and enhance working lands while maintaining or enhancing valuable fish and wildlife habitat and other natural resources. So I just wanted to put this up at the top because it does sit at the top of the bill that established the program. And I think just is important context for us as we're going to dive into the nitty-grittiness of the rulemaking to just kind of keep these high-level intents in mind as we're going through. And so there was a bill. That bill gets translated into statute. And you all received a copy of our existing statute as a part of your meeting materials. I think it starts on page 10, or no, page 15, I'm sorry, of the draft rules set that we sent out. So we put it down at the bottom of the rule set so that you can be referencing statute as we're going through suggested rule edits. Because rule exists, and Eric may talk about this a little bit, to help us interpret statute and actually implement it on the ground. And so we need to make sure that as we're doing our rulemaking, we're not contradicting statute, but we're interpreting it and applying it out into the wild. And so there's quite a bit in statute, but I think particularly for us and the focus we're going to have today and throughout our rulemaking process, we're going to want to focus in on a couple of subsections. And so that would be 981, 982, 984, and 989. And so I was going to just pull those up real quick just to familiarize you with those. I'm not going to read them verbatim, but just to kind of highlight it. So you'll see where our statute exists in chapter 541. There's a lot in chapter 541, but it's easy to find our portion of that because we are at the very bottom of the chapter. So we start here in working lands at 541977. So you'll see in our statute, we have a few definitions, and those are expanded upon in rule, and we'll spend a little bit of time with definitions as we go. It talks about it establishes the fund, the Agricultural Heritage Fund, which is where we make our grants from, and talks about what we can and can't spend the money on that is in that fund. So specifically, because we're going to be dealing with Division 10 today and the Conservation Management Plan program, 981 lays out kind of the requirements of what goes into a conservation management plan. And you'll see it's not extensive, but there are certain things that need to be in a plan, and it sets out the purpose of what those plans need to be for. And so we'll want to be referencing this as we go through, but I don't think there's anything too tricky in here that needs to be called attention to. But just we're going to need to keep this one in the back of our mind. Similarly, with 982 for the Conservation Covenant and Easement Program, we're not going to be touching on that. That's Division 15 of our rules today. But this is going to be a relevant portion of the statute as we're doing our rulemaking. So just calling that to our attention. I do think Section 984, Grant Programs, Technical Committees, and Rules, has a few places where it is going to constrain our ability to tweak the program and make it work in a way that some folks maybe want it to. And so we will be trying to highlight as we go through the rulemaking where we're bound by statute to operate in a certain way, and where maybe a previous rulemaking process interpreted a statute that gives us some maneuverability. And so again, I was on the fence about reading this to you all, but I think I'm not going to do that because it is quite extensive. But this Section 984 is really a lot of the mechanics of the program sort of live in this section. So just want to call that to folks' attention. And then 986 and 987 just kind of talk about the commission. That's all pretty straightforward, who's on it. and how it's organized, and some of the how the commission can operate itself and appoint technical committees, so on and so forth. Again, I don't think that's super relevant to us today, but all of statute is relevant, so we don't want to skip over it too much. But the last section I wanted to call our attention to is 989, talking about the commission's duties and roles, and you'll see one of the main duties is providing, wait, where is it? Yeah. Policies and priorities for use for the board is providing the rule recommendations to the board for their adoption. And so this is a big role of the commission, and that's what we are serving here today, and that rulemaking role. And a lot of that, the reason we're using the commission as a RAC is rooted in what's laid out in statute for what the commission ought to be doing. So with that, I wanted to pause just real quick and see if there's any questions about how statute relates to rule, or how that's going to impact the process, before I dive into kind of some lessons learned. And Renee, you might have to help me to see if anybody has their hand up. Otherwise, I think I just have 2 slides left.
Currently no hands raised, Taylor.
Great. Okay, I must be being clear. Okay, so then, like I mentioned, we have our statute, and then we, back in 2019, early 2019, adopted our initial rule set. And I was just gonna make sure folks are familiar with where that lives. So here it is. We have 25, or we have division 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25. And like I mentioned, we're going to be focusing our time initially on division 5, which are the administrative rules, and then division 10, which are the rules that govern the conservation management plan. When we get together in July, I think we're going to spend the bulk of the meeting on division 15, which is the covenant and easement program. And then in August, we'll tackle division 20 and 25, and any loose ends we have with previous divisions. And just some kind of high level observations we've had of staff and feedback we've gotten from grantees and program participants over this past 2 years. I think kind of one theme is it would be helpful in the rule set to simplify where possible. I'm recognizing that we're going for clarity, and so sometimes simplifying provides that additional clarity, because if there's too many rules, it's hard to follow them all. But also, not simplifying to the degree where the intent gets lost and it's unclear what the commission is looking for. Kind of along that line, there has been some feelings that perhaps the evaluation criteria is too extensive at least for the 2 grant programs we've run thus far. In statute lays out basically 5 evaluation criteria for both conservation management plans and conservation easements. And then in our rule set, you'll see for the conservation management plan, we have 23 evaluation criteria, and we're going to be adding 3 additional climate criteria, so taking us to 26 evaluation criteria, which might seem like a lot until you look at the conservation easement rules, which have 31 evaluation criteria. And again, we'll be adding 3 additional criteria in order to incorporate that climate criteria. So yeah, the evaluation criteria may be too extensive. We'll explore that. And then there's some additional clarity that would be helpful around some of the definitions and some of the criteria. And we'll talk about those specifically as we're running through the rules. There's some questions around, what do we mean when we say agricultural viability? In the criteria, is the level of, when we're talking about the level of threat of conversion as a evaluation criteria, and thinking about our conservation management plans, is a higher level of threat a good thing, or is a higher level of threat a bad thing because those investments would potentially be lost. So again, just some clarity is going to be useful as we go through. And then there's a little bit of ambiguity. Well, I don't know if ambiguity is the right word. There's some tweaks we propose in the rules, and you'll see it, distinguishing between bodies. So OWEB, which means the agency, and so that would be staff, the board, which is the OWEB board, and the commission, which is you all here. And so just thinking through how to best run this program, where it makes sense for those decisions to be made, and just from a process perspective, how do we efficiently and effectively roll out this program, just thinking about which bodies do what. And so you'll see we'll be kind of zeroing in on that as we go. So with that, I think I'm going to end the show and stop my share for a second and just see if we have any questions about sort of where we've been and where we're headed. Because after this, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up Division 5, and we're going to kind of start running through our rule set and thinking about how to improve things. So Renee?
Yeah, Taylor, thanks for that. Super helpful. I just want to make sure to communicate to the commission in your current role as a RAC, the slide that captured the 22 grantee and applicant feedback. To be clear, that is not the only feedback we've gotten from applicants and grantees. So there are some pieces that are related to rule. I would say a set of those, probably a more significant set of those, is about, it has a nexus more to the covenants and easements, which we'll get into next meeting, but there are a whole set of suggestions and feedback that we've gotten, I would say more around kind of process, implementation, and whether that's how we solicit the application questions, the review process, which can have a nexus to rule, the implementation of the grant program. So I want to make sure we state that on record so that folks don't feel as though, wait, I provided some really what I thought was helpful feedback and I'm not seeing that reflected in the slide. We will get to that. It's just we're trying to keep the focus here on the rules, knowing that there will be process pieces that we're talking through with folks too. Thanks, Taylor.
Yeah, thanks for that, Renee. Bruce.
Yeah, I was just wondering, have we also solicited or heard from the reviewers, the technical review teams who had to apply 23 or how many, and now get to think about 31? And
yeah, so I mean, we conducted kind of informal debriefs with all reviewers following the 22 cycle / 23 awards, and incorporated that into our sort of initial brain dump into what would be useful in tweaking these rules specifically around the evaluation criteria. And you'll see a lot more of that when we get into Division 15. I think they had a lot more substantive feedback. The main feedback I got from the reviewers on the conservation management planning side of things was this is a lot of evaluation criteria for not a lot of investment. And so that was the main theme on that front. But I think the feedback that Robin and I captured for the easement program has made it into a lot of our suggested edits for Division 15. Yes, Bruce.
sorry, I just have
You can
one.
just speak too. You don't need to raise your hand.
Yeah. Well, I can take my turn, but it'd be helpful to know, is there a clear line between what needs to be in rules and what could be in guidance?
Well, I guess the short answer is no, there's not. I mean, we need to implement statute. And so like I mentioned, I mean, there are certain evaluation criteria that exist in statute that need to be translated over into rule. The rest of the evaluation criteria, I mean, it is really what we're doing here. I mean, there are other rules that we're going to talk about, but I think we'll likely spend a fair amount of time thinking through the evaluation criteria and what ought to be an evaluation criteria and what is, yeah, like you're saying, Bruce, additional guidance that we would want to provide to applicants as to what the commission is looking for when they're measuring that evaluation criteria. Because if it makes it into rule as a separate evaluation criteria, because we don't weight our evaluation criteria, they all look a bit equal when you get your evaluations. And so we'll just need to think through what are the most important pieces and what are more of those guidance pieces, and we'll get there. Okay, well, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric real quick to just reground us in what a RAC does before we start doing that thing. So take it away, Eric.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Taylor. Yeah, I just really wanted to reiterate a couple points that were made back in the April commission meeting when the rulemaking was first, or was at least brought up during that meeting. So, I think one of the most important points, and Taylor, you kind of hit on this during your presentation, is that OAHP utilizes administrative rules to interpret statute to describe our grant programs. So the solicitation, the review of applications, funding decisions, and administration of grants are really what's included in our administrative rules. In Oregon, agency rulemaking is a formal process, which often includes a board or commission initiating rulemaking, developing a rulemaking advisory committee or the RAC to discuss potential changes to rules, public comment periods on final draft rules, review by agency, Department of Justice counsel, and ultimate approval of those rules by boards and commissions. So really, combined with statutes, administrative rules are really at the heart of what we do. So rulemaking is a really important process in driving agency policy. In our case, the OAHP board initiates rulemaking if existing rules need to be amended or if there's new rules that need to be developed. Staff form a rulemaking advisory committee to help develop rule language to bring back to the OAHP board for ultimate approval. So the RAC serves as an advisory body to OAHP with the role of providing advice and kind of framing those policy choices to the agency. And we realize that the rulemaking for OAHP is a little bit different than our other rulemakings, as the commission forms the RAC and will actually approve the rules before sending it to the board for ultimate approval. But at the heart, the responsibilities are really the same in any RAC. One thing to keep in mind as we kind of go through all of this is that statute requires us to seek the RAC's recommendation on whether rule changes will have a fiscal impact, what that fiscal impact will be, and whether the rule would have a significant adverse impact on small businesses. At OAHP, we don't ever think that our proposed rules or revisions to rules would have an adverse impact to small businesses, but really kind of keep this in mind through the discussions as the RAC proceeds. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions before turning it back to Taylor. Okay, not seeing any. Back to you, Taylor.
Oh, sorry, my dog was making a bunch of noise, but we've solved that problem. Okay, so with that, we are going to dive into our rule set. And I would encourage folks, as we're going through, you'll see in the material we sent out that as staff, we've tried to incorporate feedback that we've gotten and observations we've had into some suggested edits or highlighting areas for consideration. But I would encourage you all to not let us blow past any section of the rules that you have questions on or find confusing or have some good ideas for some tweaks. We just want to, I encourage you just to take yourself off mute, speak up. This doesn't need to be a hand raised situation. Like let's make sure that we deal with these each in turn. And I do want to highlight just kind of how this is going to work. So we're going to be capturing, Teresa is here in the document. Once I pull it up, you'll see she'll help us capture feedback from the RAC. She'll make comments into the existing rule set that then at our next RAC meeting, we as staff will have incorporated those, and I'll review those with the RAC to show where we've incorporated feedback. So we'll run back through Division 5 and Division 10, show the proposed edits based on what we do today, before then moving into the same process with Division 15. So we'll kind of do this I guess ratcheting approach to our rulemaking process as we go. So if you as you're going to sleep tonight, you think of something that didn't get captured in the conversation today, this is not the end all be all of the conversation we're going to have about this particular part of the rule set. But this is the time that we have to dive in deep on these particular divisions, Division 5 and Division 10. So with that, I am going to share my screen again, and we will pull up the rule set.
Hey, Taylor, while you're doing that, just a few other logistics. So there are several of us who will be taking notes, more detailed notes. Teresa, in her comments, will try to capture, I think, the more concise message. We will not be doing inline editing. And we, at this point, will not be doing group editing. We want to get kind of the concepts and the key messages from the RAC. And there will be plenty of time to provide very specific editing feedback. I say that partly for myself because I tend to like things to be precise early on. We will get there, we promise.
Yes. Okay, so with that, thanks, Renee. I guess we'll start with our with the first section of Division 5, which is the purpose. We have highlighted the purpose as a possible area for adjustment. This is a bit of an interpretation of statute that doesn't come directly from statute. And it's part of the reason I read us all the whereas statements in the beginning. I think some of the intent of the program as it was passed by the legislature comes through those whereas statements and then through the mechanics of the grant programs themselves. So I just thought it'd be nice to pause here and just get our juices flowing and do a gut check if this feels like a perfect description of what we're trying to achieve through the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program, or if this could be refined to any degree that would help us have a bigger impact. And so you'll see we do have a suggested edit in the third purpose, if we're going to keep these as is, to change from enhance fish and wildlife habitat, water quality, and other natural resources on Oregon's working land to maintain or enhance. And this is to better align, to align with statute. That's how it's described in statute. And for some of our programs, specifically the conservation easement program, thus far we've noticed it's, sometimes that the benefit is that they are maintaining already highly functioning fish and wildlife habitat, whether or not an easement is the appropriate tool to enhance in every situation may or may not be the case. So just to kick off the conversation, wanted to kind of frame it like that. And I see that Jim Bob has some initial thoughts.
Increase economic viability of Oregon's agricultural operations economic sector. Are we going to dictate what they invest the money in that from the easement? Because I mean, is that going to help? Because I'm not sure how, unless they're buying more ground or improving efficiencies of their agricultural business, how we're going to increase their economic viability. I mean, we're giving the landowner more funding to do something with. I'm just wondering, is that going to be a requirement of it, that it has to go into something that makes them more?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so does every project need to increase the economic viability of the operation that we're investing in? I think, there's an argument that by putting an easement on a particular piece of working land, you're going to keep that land available for agriculture, which would increase the viability of an agricultural operation, but perhaps not anybody's individual economic situation, except for the landowner in that instance. Yeah, Amanda, do you have thoughts to add on that are a bit more?
I was just thinking it might be more concise to say increased economic resiliency instead of viability, since, what you're driving at is keeping the farm or ranch operational for 20 to 50 years into the future and adapting or adopting climate smart practices in order to do that. So maybe something like resiliency instead of increased viability.
And this is Doug Kramer. Another thought there might be that we use maintain, just like we did in number 3 there, where we could say maintain or increase economic viability.
Okay. Sorry, it's got some wheels turning for me. I'm just trying to think about if we have increased economic viability in other parts of the rule set that this is going to impact. And I think it will when we get to evaluation criteria, but we can think about that at the point in time we get there. Bruce, do you have additional thoughts before we? Oh, but you're muted.
Excuse me. Yes. I mean, the sentence says public benefits, and the viability of an operation in itself is probably not the public benefit. The public benefit is a healthy agricultural economy and the food and fiber and all the things it produces on the agricultural side, and the fish and wildlife habitat values and natural ecological benefits there. So partly it's a grammar sort of thing, which also we need to pay attention to the grammar here, because we don't really have parallel construction. Public benefits of maintain doesn't read as a sentence. But that's not the important part at this point. It's to get to the substance of it.
This is Laura Masterson. I just wanted to agree with Doug, because I think some of the situations I've seen are when people, in the case of habitat or economic viability, I guess, have already done a great job. Then there isn't a lot of uplift that's still there. That doesn't mean we don't want to conserve these properties. So it makes sense to me to add maintain to number 1.
Okay. Grammar notwithstanding.
Well, you guys can do the wordsmithing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It also sort of ties into the evaluation criteria in the statute where we say protect, maintain, or enhance. So,
Right.
all you have to do is add ing to the verbs and then you get the public benefit.
Perfect. Doug, I saw you come off mute. Did you have something to add on this front?
No, I already added it. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Great. Okay, but generally we feel like these three buckets, economic viability, reducing conversion and or fragmentation, and maintaining or enhancing fish and wildlife habitat, those are the kind of the three buckets that we're dumping our purpose into. That feels true. Okay. Well, so Teresa's captured a comment here that we'll work to incorporate maybe some updated language, speaking to how the program will increase economic viability, and does every project need to do that? And then think about, do we go with maintain and enhance economic viability, or do we potentially look at increase economic resiliency? So yeah, we'll do some wordsmithing on that and come back to the commission at the next meeting. Is there any other thoughts you want us to kind of like consider as we're thinking about the purpose? And then I promise we'll kind of start moving through a little bit quicker. But I thought it was helpful for us to linger here at the top, because this really does kind of guide all of the grant programs that we run, and is weaved throughout our rule set. So just want to make sure we're capturing everybody's thoughts here and making this as clear as we can. But,
Hey, Taylor.
yeah.
One brief mention. I do think that the RAC may hear some public comment later today, and if not, certainly next RAC meeting, where I think, to Nancy's point, some of the purpose translates to evaluation criteria and some ideas folks have. So we will take this feedback, work on some things, but know that you may be hearing public comment about how does that then kind of perpetuate out into proportional weighting of evaluation criteria as we get into some of the easement discussion.
Yeah. Thanks, Renee. Okay, so we'll leave that for now, for what it is, and we'll move into a relatively straightforward section, is our definitions. So the main edits we propose as staff have to do with incorporating definitions that are associated with the proposed climate criteria that we'll be incorporating later into the section. And so we have a definition for carbon sequestration, a definition for carbon storage, and then I'm going to zoom past down to number 9, a definition for durable adaptation and resilience for ecosystems. Those kind of come to us from the rules that were incorporated into OWEB's Division 5, and the board has requested that we incorporate those into the OAHP rule set. And so we would, in addition to incorporating the criteria, we would incorporate these definitions as well. So we can potentially have more conversation about the criteria when we get down to that section, but does anybody have thoughts on our existing definitions, or these new definitions that they want to highlight? Great. Okay, so we also have a proposal to move a definition, definition number 5, which is a conservation management plan holder, and moving that down into Division 10. The reason being is that it's only used in Division 10, and the specific definitions just to be consistent with how this is structured, usually the definitions that are specific to a division end up in that division's definitions, helps keep things a little more clear. So any objections to that or thoughts as to why we might want to keep it up here in Division 5? Going once, going twice. And like I said, feel free to bring us back as we're moving through, if I move through too quick. The next, I guess, a bit of a philosophical question for the, or not the commission, sorry, but for the RAC is the incorporation of land use statute in our definitions. And so I think it's used a few times. The first time here is where we're talking about accepted farming practices, and we're kicking that definition to the statute that defines accepted farming practices in the land use code. And so sometimes this creates a bit of a challenge, or I guess it has maybe some maybe it's not the perfect definition for this program. What land use speaks to how land is used, whereas our program is sometimes more focused on the potential use. And so those can sometimes, a land might have a high probability or potential to support an agricultural business, but may not be doing so currently. And so tying our definitions to land use, as specifically if we look down here at what is now 10, farming and ranching means farm use. And we that again, it speaks to what is currently happening on the land, not the potential for it. And so just kind of wanted to see where folks fall on this, and if we have thoughts about keeping it tied to the land use code, moving away from it, or getting a bit more nuance with where we use it and where we don't. But Amanda, looks like you have an initial thought.
I was maybe a clarification question more than anything, but if you're going to use the definition cessation of accepted farming practices under the conservation management plans that we're reviewing, I'm wondering if say like a conservation plan converted farming next to a riparian area into a buffer instead for enhanced water quality and wildlife habitat, are those conflicting ideas? Or is that too in the weeds?
Well, the weeds is where we're living. That's what this is all about. Yeah, Robin, do you have thoughts on that as it relates to land use?
Yeah, I think it's a good consideration to think about too, from in the context of the land use statute, also referring to the profit aspect of that definition.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think it's like, it's a complicated statute to use for a definition that's not wholly applicable to the program. And so I think we do want to spend some time working through that consideration as to whether it's we're borrowing in a way that is makes sense specifically for this program. And then I think, like, in the context of the next definition, just since we're in this topic in 10, where it refers to farming and ranching, is that the definition used there is not what is used then later in the conservation easement rules. So there's just a mismatch of using the statutory reference when it's not used consistently across the rule set. So there's a couple different things to consider in the context of using this specific statute reference
If I could ask one more clarification question just for my benefit too. Are we talking all working lands in state of Oregon, which would also include forest lands eligible for conservation? Because I know there's overlap often with the ranching and the forested lands.
So that's a great topic to bring in, because this definition of farming and ranching in or farm use in 215-2032 does kind of exclude timber ground and property that is more addressed in kind of the forestry rules. So it doesn't speak to working forest in that context, but we don't have right now a rule or kind of a working process to determine like if a property is, if it has forest land that is also used for an agricultural purpose, grazing or something like that wouldn't disqualify it because it still meets the farming and ranching part of the statutory definition.
And I guess maybe more what I was wondering, I'm sorry, just one more thing, is if it's like exclusive timber use, is it eligible for OAHP programs, or does it have to have a farming ranching component to it?
Yes.
It does, okay.
And that was discussed when we were putting this program together, because there is another program that forestry owners can use for a purpose similar to what this program is. So as I understand it, this program is for land that's predominantly used for agriculture. And if it's predominantly used for forestry, it's not going to be used. That land would not be eligible for this program. It would be used under a forestry type program. And I guess that's a little bit what I wanted to talk about on that B was we're talking about accepted farming practices for that land. I don't know how to describe accepted farming practices any better than 215-203 does that. We could try and come up with our own definition of accepted farming practices, but I don't know that I'm going to be very comfortable with it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Doug. And I think that speaks to a little bit of the nuance. I don't know that it's necessarily across the board or even in any spot that we'd want to take out the reference to land use. But I think the least strong case is likely accepted farming practices, just because it does spell that out specifically. I think when we get down here to what is now 10, farming and ranching means farm use as described in the land use statute. I think Robin alluded to some of the challenges that come along if the land is not potentially being used for profit at the time of application. That wouldn't meet the definition of farm use. And so it may preclude certain properties coming into the program and being eligible.
Yeah, I'm certainly willing to have a discussion on that one. I think the one up above is more clear cut.
You know, I seem to recall it was really about maintaining the potential for future farming and ranching use. It wasn't that every acre or every square foot had to be being used for it right now. It was more went to the potential and the capacity of the land to support that.
Yeah. Okay, well, how about this? How about we leave this as is for now with the consideration. I think we'll likely not change it in what is now 7B. And as we're going through the rule set, I think we can keep this in mind, our definition of farming and ranching, and see if it causes challenges for us as we're thinking through eligibility for grant programs and evaluation criteria. But Robin, you have more context to add.
Yeah, I just want, before we move away from this, and
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that the definition used here, it does confine farming and ranching more than the statutory definition. So working land is defined in, and so it's just an elaboration. So I just wanted to call the connection that there is some statutory connection between this definition and what we have in the rules. That's all, just in case people wanted somewhere else to go for additional context when looking at this. And that's just in our definitions.
All right. Thanks for that, Robin.
Taylor, I got one more request.
Yeah.
Next time you work on this document, can you put page numbers in? I mean, I printed it out so I could make marks on it, all that, and of course, keeping the pages in order when they don't have numbers.
I could probably do it on the fly right now as we're going.
Okay.
That's a yes. Somebody help me not forget to do that. That's a really good point.
And can somebody send a link to the part of the statute that you were referencing? You're talking about the statute, like just for OAHP, that has some farm and ranch definitions in it. Where is that?
So that is in, so it will be it's in your meeting material starting on page 15. We have the definitions in statutes, the first section. And it's 541 977, and there's a definition of working land. And so that's working land means land that is actively used by an agricultural owner or operator for agricultural operation that includes, but need not be limited to, active engagement in farming or ranching. So we have a definition for working land in statute, but we don't have a definition in statute for farming and ranching or farm use.
And really, it sounds like the only reason to take out the reference to the other statute is because it talks about actively versus, potentially being able to use for farming. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think that's one of the main stumbling blocks it creates for us later in the rule set, and the other is the for-profit of part of the definition. So it precludes any not-for-profit type operations being considered farm use.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so Robin, I want to check with you. Do you feel like we've captured what we need in order to think about that? And so we'll present kind of where we come down on that as a proposed edit, whether we propose keeping it or not at the next meeting. But this is helpful conversation. So thanks for that.
I just wanted to say that because it seems like we're leaving it in a little bit of a confusing place. So
yeah,
I'll just say my opinion is that I want to be able to consider not-for-profit entities, and I think it's fine if it's not actively being farmed, and that's such a classic and comprehensive definition of farming and ranching. So I mean, I just wonder if there's a way to use the definition and add those two other components that we need in there. I don't know that, because I hate to lose the reference, because it really does, like, it's the Oregon definition of what working lands are. So that's my 2 cents. I don't know if that makes it more complicated or less complicated, but anyway, There you go.
All right. So don't give it up easily, is what I'm hearing. See if we can keep it and maybe use the additional approach as opposed to striking it. Okay, we'll see what we can do. And again, thank you for all the thoughts on this. We'll see if we can try and incorporate everybody's take into something that'll be workable. Okay, so moving us along then, we already talked about 14. The definition of management plan here, again, similarly to conservation management plan holder, we're suggesting moving the definition of management plan to division 15, which is the only place in our rule set where it is referenced. And then something just to chew on, maybe just for a brief second here, and we can do it more once we get to division 15. But we may consider changing what we call management plans to reduce confusion between our existing conservation management plan grant program and the management plans that are referenced in our conservation easement rule set. Just throwing that out there. I don't think we need to dive into that, but that's something we can chew on for next time. But are there any objections, I guess, to moving this definition for now to division 15 and dealing with what we actually call management plans when we talk about division 15 next time? Great. Okay. I'm going to start moving us at a bit of a quicker clip. So then again, the last place where we talk about land use statute is here at what is now 17, where we define working land, which again is defined in in our statute, but then we define it here and we say that farming and ranching means active engagement in farm use as opposed to farming and ranching. So again, it's tied to working land being in farm use, which is an active definition. So we'll again need to consider whether or not we want that active definition or maybe some additional tweaks. So we'll make those proposed tweaks and we'll bring those back to the commission next time. Okay, moving from definitions into application requirements. We generally here just trying to make this align better with how things work at the agency, so we can again streamline our process and make sure that we're following the rules, and the rules speak to what is feasible for us to do. So again, we're just asking folks to submit submit their applications on the most current format required by OAHP. That gives the agency a bit more latitude, because one day maybe that won't be made available on the OAHP website, who knows? And then getting rid of this last sentence: in addition to the information required in the application, an applicant may submit additional information that will aid the commission in evaluating the project. And we suggest removing this because you'll see later on in our rules, we say applications are considered complete as submitted. And so we need to pick one. We can spend a couple minutes here talking about that and then breeze through it later on in the rule set. What does the commission want? Do we want applications complete as submitted? Or is there a desire to have additional information trickling in after the application has been submitted? And I think staff have some opinions on this. It's a bit difficult to facilitate getting additional information outside of a formal solicitation, but I did want to give space to the RAC here to think through that. So does anybody have thoughts?
This is Laura.
Yep.
I presume this is coming from the applicants because there's some challenges getting this all ready in time or at the same time.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure where it came from originally. We're suggesting consistency through the rule set. And so we either need to have applications complete as submitted, or we need to get rid of that part of the rule and have more of a free flowing type process that we would probably need to define a little bit better. But Eric, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I just wanted to provide a little more context that there is a Division 5 rule set on the OWEB grant program side of things, which looks a lot like the Division 5 rule set for OAHP. And a little over a year ago, we did some rulemaking on that Division 5 rule set for OWEB, and it looked a lot like this. And this is where these recommended changes came, just to really kind of streamline the rules. And because that sort of conflict when it came to, is the application considered complete when submitted, came up there as well. I think you'll see if once you get to the application processing rule here, that does provide a little bit more flexibility, that if there is additional information that the commission wishes to see, that can be requested of the applicant. But we wanted to make sure that it's clear that, you know, when you do submit an application, that's your application. You shouldn't need to go back and say, oh, but wait, here's some more information that comes in after the deadline.
Thanks for that, Eric. Renee?
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. So Laura, I think in more direct response to your question, so this has been in the rule set since they were drafted and then adopted in early 19. And I think to what Eric Hartstein just said, we fairly close in proximity in the current rules have conflicting guidance. More information can come in, application is considered complete as submitted. So we need to fix that. I think one, to be consistent. And then I think Taylor touched on this. If the intent is to have the ability for more information to flow in afterwards, we would absolutely need to develop a process for that from a consistency and equitability standpoint with applicants. So if that is something of interest to ultimately the commission, but now you're serving as a RAC, I think it's important to know there would need to be process definition around that so that it is clear what the timing and the expectations of that are, so that we don't have different bars for different applicants.
Yeah,
thanks, Taylor.
A big thing. Thanks, Renee. Bruce?
Yeah, I'm fine with the suggested edit here. I think the application should be complete when it comes in. I think what this probably originally meant was, you can tell us anything else you want us to know about your project that's going to persuade us. It's kind of including but not limited to this information. But I don't think we ever meant to imply that you can keep dribbling into us, you know, as it occurs to you. But in any case, I'm fine with making it shorter.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll come back with a proposed edit next time and kind of review that. But thank you for your thoughts on that. So then along a similar vein, we're suggesting just getting rid of number 2, which just, it lines out all of the things that need to be basically in a grant application. Not that we don't want to have most or all of these things in a grant application, but it does, as you know, we operate within OWEB and OWEB's online grant management system, and there may be a point in time where we want to leave something out or have something included, and this just, it makes it very rigid, and this doesn't exist in other rule sets. So we were proposing just striking this to make it simpler to administer the program. But if there's anything in here that is very, very important to the RAC that we ought to keep in. Now would be the time to speak up about that. Okay. Great. Well, we're going to suggest that it's removed, and that's we'll talk about that again when we come back to it next time. And then for number 3, we're again, to be consistent with what's happening on the OWEB division side of things, we're suggesting moving number 3 down into application processing, which is the section below, just for some clarity. And so that's that one we were talking about. Applications will be considered complete as submitted. Clarification of information may be sought from the applicant during the evaluation process, but additional new information will not be accepted after the application deadline. Anyway, it just seems to make more sense down in application processing. And again, I'm going to try and move us a little quicker, so just interrupt me if I'm moving past something too fast. I don't want to bulldoze anybody here. So if we did that, then that would move down here into this section and replace what is now number 2, which again has this language that creates a little bit of ambiguity around what we just said about applications being considered complete as submitted. It says the commission may require additional information to aid in evaluating and considering a proposed grant project. It's again, we would, if we want to keep this, we would need to develop some process around it. And then again, if we want to keep it, I think the require language is a bit challenging to implement, because we ask folks to submit applications that are considered complete as they're submitted, and to then be turning around and requiring additional information means that some applicants have the opportunity to provide more information than others. And so we just want to think about how to make sure that this stays fair. So the easiest way is to remove it. But we don't want to just be removing things willy-nilly. So did people have thoughts on why we would want to keep that? Okay, well, we're going to suggest removing it then, and then moving down into climate. So Bruce, I was hoping maybe you could give a 15, 30-second spiel about the climate-related evaluation criteria and your involvement in the OWEB rulemaking, and how we're looking to incorporate that here into the ag heritage side of the equation.
Oh, I wish I could give you a good one. Eric could do better, but we were trying to keep it fairly simple. The whole idea is that applicants need to demonstrate that they are thinking about this stuff, and that and show wherever it's applicable how it relates to their project and the benefits that they might generate, and in connection with that, how they have worked with local communities that may be disproportionately impacted by climate change. And it's not that there's not a real checklist there. We want to know if that informed your application and the nature of your project. That's a plus, and you should tell the commission about it there. But it's really just to ask people to provide evidence that they have thought about these issues and are have addressed them in the development of their project. Eric could give you a much more concise, or probably a better explanation.
I don't think I could say anything better than that, Bruce. And just to be clear, Bruce was on our rulemaking advisory committee when we developed these climate-related evaluation criteria. So, thank you.
Okay.
Process.
Well, does anybody have any heartburn about incorporating the climate criteria as drafted here? We're doing it in Division 5, so it'll apply to all 4 of our grant programs. It's just a simpler way to do it. And it does, increase the number of evaluation criteria by 3. So we'll just have to keep that in mind as we're considering the other evaluation criteria. But yeah, any thoughts? Otherwise, I'll move us on to grant agreement conditions. Okay. Grant agreement conditions. So here, there's just kind of some clarifying suggested edits. And here's where we get into talking about who's on first, basically. What entity does what? So again, remember, we have OWEB, the agency. We have the board, which is OWEB's board. And then we have the commission. So those are kind of the 3 players here in our rule set as to who does what. And so you'll see as we go through that we have suggestions where it might make sense to change from one to the other. And here's our first one. So as opposed to the board will enter into new grant agreements, we have OWEB will enter into new grant agreements, being because it's the agency that's entering into those grant agreements, not the board itself. So
Hey, Taylor.
yes, go for it, Renee.
Yeah, so for the benefit of the RAC, we, and Eric Hartstein can attest to this, we have had to work over many years to clarify, even in just the OWEB specific rule sets. Are we talking about the board in their decisional role, or are we talking about the agency, who is the one perpetuating grant agreements, for example, out with a grantee? So this is something that we have been working for quite some time to get clear on, and then subsequently clean up when we open rules for revision. So we're basically doing the same with the OAHP rule sets. There were times when we weren't clear or precise. So in fact, porting over some of those cleanups that we've done in the OWEB rule sets and thinking through, okay, in the OAHP context, who's on first for these different things, and trying to just be very clear and explicit about that here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to have an agency that's named the same as the board that governs it. So it's a unique challenge we have. Okay, so just keep that in mind as we're going through. Again, for clarity's sake here in number 2, so if the grant agreement hasn't been fully executed, the monies allocated to that grant shall be available for reallocation by the board. And so we wanted to add in here for purposes of the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program, so that it's clear that that money is not being recaptured into the general pot, but it stays in the Agricultural Heritage Fund. And I think mechanically it does that, but this just adds some additional clarity. But Amanda, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think your clarity point makes sense. My comment is actually more about the 1-year stipulation. Given what we were briefed on with the project timelines at the last meeting, I'm wondering if it makes more sense to say something to the extent of, the project timeline duration.
Yeah, that's I appreciate that catch.
So I think, Taylor, to point out here, this is speaking to the grant agreement itself being executed within 1 year. So
not the project.
Yeah, not the project being completed.
Okay,
So this is kind of, if we can't get to agreement onto the terms of how the project will proceed between the grantee and the agency, then it gives the board the flexibility to relook at those funds.
Which in a year probably makes sense. Okay. Okay, then similarly in 5, same sort of thing, just making sure that any sort of reallocation by the board, those funds stay in the Ag Heritage Program. We suggest getting rid of number 6. The grantee will account for funds distributed by the board using project expense forms provided by OWEB. This just isn't how OWEB, the agency, is doing things currently. And so it creates a bit of a challenge for us to follow the rules. It would be a different process. So considering removing that, we accept project expense forms on whatever forms folks are using to track their expenses. Then again, number 7, some clarification, changing it from the board to OWEB. And I think a lot of the changes were changes from the board to OWEB. Probably the commission doesn't have a ton of thoughts. I think probably more of the input, the RAC, that the RAC will have here is where we're thinking about where things are moving from or to the commission. And so I'm not going to pause on these because we're running a little behind time. But again, stop me if I'm going too fast here. So then we're going to get down into distribution of funds. So again, there's a change from the board to OWEB. And then in number 2, we have a suggested edit. So funds will be released upon, and before we had presentation of a completed fund release request form. And again, this just isn't really how the agency is currently operating. So it's funds will be released upon receipt of a completed request as prescribed by OWEB. So this again gives the agency a little bit more room to maneuver and update our processes as time goes on, and this doesn't make it quite as rigid. So gonna breeze past that if folks don't have a problem with that, and then get into here is the first instance where we're suggesting a shift from the commission to the agency. So advanced funds may be released upon presentation of a detailed estimate of expenses for up to 120 days. Within 120 days of the date of the advance, check, receipts, or invoices for the advance must be submitted. A justification to the extent the advance must be approved, or the unexpended advance funds must be returned to the commission. And so we're suggesting that this be OWEB because those funds actually do come back to the agency who is administering the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Fund. Whereas the commission is making recommendations for how that fund is spent, but they aren't the administrator of that fund. So just wanted to do a gut check on that. See if we got a thumbs up. Okay. I think that will be one of the most straightforward ones. And then we're suggesting removing the funding decisions reconsiderations by the board section. Mostly because it seems unnecessary. So this, and Robin, can you help me here as to what the rationale was? It was in my mind.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So this is talking to like what happens if the conditions that are part of a grant agreement are not being met. And so those conditions essentially get folded into a grant agreement. The grant agreement lays out all the obligations and expectations between the grantee and OWEB in kind of completing that project and moving forward. So there's already like the GA itself and how those conditions play out in those specific GAs is what we think is really the space for this type of conversation and this kind of reconsideration. And so putting this type of kind of requirement into a rule set kind of adds some confusion as to the role of the GA and how, or the grant agreement, sorry, and how those conditions work within there.
Okay, I'm seeing thumbs up, no strong feelings. So we'll proceed with that. And then the last section here, Division 5, we've made it to the end, is about technical committees. And so, you know, in addition to technical committees established by the commission to rank and evaluate, and so it says currently conservation management plans and working land conservation covenants and easements, grant applications. We're suggesting taking that out because that creates a little bit of confusion and doesn't include our TA grants or our succession planning grants. So it just seems a bit unnecessary to call out 2 of our 4 grant programs here. So it would just read to rank and evaluate grant applications. So any heartburn around that? Thumbs up I'm seeing. Great. Okay. Well, I guess, well, then there's the waiver and periodic review of rules. So again, we give the director the authority to waive rules. This is kind of standard operating procedure at OWEB. The only tweak we have to this existing rule is that this last sentence here, the administrative rules for the OAHP program shall be periodically reviewed, and is said by the commission and revised as necessary. So we just inserted by the commission, board, and OWEB to reflect kind of what the process actually looks like when we play it out. So here we are as staff, having done some review. OWEB, these rule revisions will go to the board. So the board is involved, and the commission is here serving as the RAC. So that is that. So that's Division 5. It is
Taylor.
3:30 and time for
Yeah.
public comment.
Yeah.
So my apologies for that taking a bit longer than we had hoped, but I really appreciate everybody's discussion. I think it was important to spend some time at the top thinking about what our purposes are. So with that, let's take public comment if people have it. I see we do have 2 participants joining. And Jan Lee. So Nicole, if you're here, will you, thank you. I don't see Jan.
No, she has decided to participate in the next meeting.
Okay, great. Okay. But she did submit public comment, which was sent out to the commission. So you have that. And then we have 2 attendees who I think are interested in providing public comment. Can you?
Yes, if any of our attendees are interested in providing public comment, can you please raise your hand, your Zoom hand?
And Taylor, can you stop screen share, please?
Oh, good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Carson, you are ready to go.
Great. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if my video is on or not, but I don't know how to turn it on. So I'm just going to dive in. Hello, everyone. Chair Kramer, Vice Chair Taylor, members of the commission, our statewide coalition, and many partners that work on our valuable farm and ranch lands. Thank you for your service on this commission. I've been in front of you all before, but my name is Carson Kendrick, and I'm the Conservation Program Manager at the Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts. We are a membership organization representing 31 land trusts, soil and water conservation districts, and conservation organizations working across Oregon to protect our habitat and natural spaces, including our working lands. Going into the 2025 legislative session, it is our top priority to secure additional funding for the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program and ultimately build a robust and sustainable working lands grant program in our state. We recently surveyed our land trust members, and I found that there is incredible demand for this program across the state. For 2024 and future cycles, there are more than 30 projects in the pipeline that would protect close to 50,000 acres of working lands. And it's crucial for our work that we continue to demonstrate the demand, the federal funding, and the need for this program in Oregon. Because this program is being implemented while administered, it is also important that this commission continues to work closely with the project applicants to improve the program during this rulemaking process. In addition, we recommend that you work to closely align the OAHP process, application criteria, ranking, and timeline with the federal process as much as is possible. Not only does better program alignment help to reduce administrative burden on applicants, it also helps them to secure and retain federal investments from the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And that was the most compelling argument that we brought to the legislature in 2024, was that there were federal dollars on the line that this program was helping to keep in our state. Secondly, we recommend that you look at the requirements under the conservation management plans to ensure landowner participation and buy-in. We have heard from a couple of land trusts that there is a little bit of landowner reluctance to participate in OAHP due to some of the oversight and requirements under the management plans. We look forward to continue to participate in this rulemaking process, and thank you again for all of your time and commitment to this program and commission. Thank you so much.
Hey, Carson, just a quick question for you. Would you like us to share your written testimony with the RAC?
Thanks, Renee. That would be great. I did submit some written testimony post deadline. My apologies. I would also direct the commission to the testimony submitted from the Oregon Agricultural Trust, as that has more detail and specific recommendations for rulemaking.
Thanks, Carson. And for the commission as RAC's benefit, the OAT comments did come in after the deadline. We did hear from them. They're very focused on the easement program. So when we get to Division 15, so in advance of the next meeting, we'll circulate those to all of you as RAC, who will be taking on Division 15 content soon.
Great.
Anyone else participating in the meal would like to provide public comment? Nope, then I think we're good. Thank you, Taylor.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. And thanks, Carson. Okay, so that's a whirlwind. We've made it to the last part of our agenda, which is next steps / conclude. So we do have 20 minutes here, and we only made it through Division 5. We were hoping to make it through Division 5 and Division 10. My apologies for being long-winded, but I think it's important that we don't rush through this. So with that being said, I think first off, we should confirm our next RAC meeting date. We had proposed at our last meeting to meet July 9th. And I would like to just spend a minute here confirming that that works for folks. I think we would likely do it at the same time at 2 o'clock, unless there are several RAC members who cannot make it. But yeah, so speak up if that doesn't work for you. Otherwise, we'll
Tuesdays are definitely a little challenging for me.
They are, okay.
But if I'm the only one, I can probably switch some stuff around. Are we talking about another 2 to 5?
That's the idea, yes.
Okay. Okay. I can make that work.
Okay.
If I'm the only one who has a challenge there.
Anybody want to join Laura? Or okay. Well, sorry, Laura. It is difficult with such a busy group of folks to get us all in the same room, but I think we'll stick with that. And we can look about potentially avoiding, you said Tuesdays going forward. So when we get to our August meeting, we'll see if we can't have something that works a little better for you. And then I want to do a gut check here with the RAC about our process. So we've been at our July 9th meeting, we were planning to do Division 15. Now we haven't, which is our conservation easement rule set. We haven't done Division 10 yet. I'm thinking we can be a little more efficient with our time. We won't need all the preamble and context setting. But I think that applicants and interested parties are kind of gearing up to tune in on July 9th for the easement rule set. And so I think it's probably important that we at least start on that on the 9th. But I guess the question is do we want to continue in sequential order and take on Division 10 first? Or is there an interest in moving to Division 15 and then coming back to Division 10? I just want to spend a minute or two here taking the temperature of the RAC. Is the interest in diving into 15 first, or do we think it's important that we go in order and start with 10? And I saw Bruce, you might have a thought on that front.
I don't think the order is that important for us, at least in my mind. If people, particularly in the public and the applicant pool out there, have an expectation that we're going to be talking about conservation easements, I would prefer to move to that for the second meeting. There's not near as much interest so far, at least, in conservation management plans as there is in the easement program. And I think we shouldn't shortchange that discussion, and if we can confine it to one meeting, that would be impressive and good.
Yeah,
So-
and some of the
This is
rationale of
Doug.
doing.
I
Oh,
agree
go for it,
with.
Doug.
I'm sorry. I agree with Bruce. I think it's important to the people that are going to participate that we do section 15, chapter 15, whatever it is, there at our 9th meeting, July 9th meeting. And if we can get to chapter 10 in that same meeting, great. Otherwise, we'll do it at a later one.
Okay. I hear that. Some of the rationale of doing 10 first and just having today not be Division 15 is it I thought it would help us get our sea legs a little bit. But I think we've done that, getting through Division 5. And so I imagine if I don't see any objections from Eric or Stephanie or Renee, that we can probably just jump to Division 15 first on the 9th and then see if we can't start on Division 10 if we have time. Does that seem like a good working plan?
Yeah, Taylor, I think that's fine. And for the benefit of the RAC again, we just recently wrapped up the drinking water source protection RAC process, and each meeting I would say to Eric Hartstein afterwards, we should have gotten farther. We will start to develop a rhythm and move through things, and the next two divisions are more complex because they have things like evaluation criteria. So that's why we plan to have 3 meetings over the summer. We can add another meeting in September if we need to. We will try to be as efficient as possible, but since rules are typically touched once every 5 years, we want to make sure we're thorough and have the opportunity for folks to have input and you all to really work through some critically important questions in terms of the foundational rules for the program.
Great. Okay. So I guess another process question to put out to those with a little more experience here, Renee, Stephanie, we're running about 15 minutes ahead now because public comment did not take very long and we don't have a ton of wrap up, but we are going to move into our business meeting, which is supposed to start at 4. What should we do? We could spend a little time working through Division 10, but that seems a bit out of order. Or we can move into our business meeting early, but we don't, because we don't have public comments. So I don't think anybody would be hurt by that. But yeah, I just want to, what's the appropriate process here?
Well, folks are getting to see the sausage making, I guess, live on YouTube right now. So we do not have anyone registered for public comment. Nicole confirmed that for the business meeting. So we could jump into it, or we could give folks 15 minutes to breathe before they move into the business meeting. Steph, Eric Hartstein, procedurally, would you prefer that we hold until the official start time of 4 o'clock for the business meeting and give folks a 15-minute break?
I think that makes sense, Renee.
Was it yes? Oh, okay. Okay, well, we have all earned a 15-minute break, it sounds like. You can come back and use the same Zoom link for the business meeting. It'll be a separate YouTube broadcast, but that doesn't affect your participation. So with that, this concludes the first meeting of the RAC. Thank you, everybody. And we will see you all for the next RAC meeting, July 9th at 2 o'clock. And we'll see the majority of you for the commission meeting here in 15 minutes.
Really quick, Taylor, to clarify, we don't have to leave this Zoom in order to. We can just
Nicole
put
just
ourselves
needs to
on
stop
mute.
the
And
okay.